Hey y'all, welcome back to another video from Founding Father Stories. I thought for today's video we would do a reaction to a review of the latest movie, Young Washington, that came out in theaters in early July of 2026, right around the time of America's 250th birthday. I had the chance of going to see the movie on the 2nd, and in terms of historical accuracy, it was a 50-50 for me. In terms of storytelling, I thought it was a great film in terms of entertainment, but I thought it'd be interesting to see a different perspective on this movie. And to do that, I think we better do a part one reaction to the title of this video, called Young Washington is Hurting America, from these channels called John Scott Bennett and Jane Marie. These are historians who have done a lot of work on YouTube. The link to the original video will be down in the description below. Let's go ahead and get started. And before I do, I just want to let you know that it's a 37-minute video, so we're probably gonna do a reaction video for 12 minutes for part one, and then we'll come back tomorrow and do a part two reaction, or the next day, kind of like what we did with Monty Python.
Young Washington, the surprise hit from Angel Studios.
You were going to change Hollywood for anybody on a conservative side.
It's a disaster for the left. Young Washington.
Did I just hear Ben Shapiro's voice in this video? I've heard about the scandal involving the Daily Wire, which is the conservative-leaning company that Shapiro owns, and they've been attempting to silence legitimate criticism from YouTube historians who did reaction videos to Matt Walsh's latest historical documentary, which, if I'm being honest, was a poor attempt at telling history. I thought it was more of like a way for them to score points and to somehow like own the other side, instead of attempting to faithfully and accurately tell the history of what really happened regarding slavery and the Civil War in American history. I've watched parts of his documentary from channels such as Logging Through History, from Cynical Historian, Mr. Beat, Atun Shea Films. People that I subscribe to who come from all ranges of the spectrum, but who all agree that the documentary wasn't exactly a 100% faithful attempt to tell history. And let's not kid ourselves, okay? Matt Walsh does not have a history background. He's just a opinion commentator who only does current events. I'm not saying he can't have his opinions, but don't twist his attempt at telling history through a documentary as somehow, oh, he's the only truth teller, because that's not the case at all.
An ambitious success.
So we generated probably an hour's worth of visual effects in one day.
Do not care about our feelings.
Whenever you're ready.
Young Washington might be one of the worst films I've ever seen. It's not just a bad film, though. Young Washington is hurting America.
That's a bold claim.
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Well, as you know, Young Washington is the newest release from Angel Studios. It is directed and written by John Irwin and was released at the height of the semi-quincentennial for the United States. But what I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around is the plot, the story of this film. It's tempting to get into the quagmire of historical inaccuracies right off the bat, and I do want to talk about them, but I can't just talk about them. This is because the goal of this film is not to present history accurately or even teach it on a surface level.
I mean, it's a movie, so of course it's not going to be an attempt to 100% talk about, or it's not going to be an attempt to 100% get the history accurate. There are certain creative or artistic licenses that a storyteller has to consider in order for its work to become entertaining and for its work to resonate with audiences. And you see that a lot with American Revolution pop culture works like Hamilton, John Adams, TV shows like Turn Washington Spies and The Patriot, where it's a mix of certain elements and aspects of their respective stories that did legit happen, and then more of fictionalized elements of the stories that didn't exist in real life. So don't think that just because there are certain things that a historical pop culture work gets inaccurate or correct means that it's automatically a bad film. And there are exceptions to that. Like, I look at movies like God's Generals from the Civil War, and I don't know why, but for some reason I used to enjoy that movie, and then I got kind of tired of it. I watched interviews and read reviews, and they deliberately tried to diverge from the book, and they portrayed slavery as like somehow a good thing in the Confederacy, and they portrayed slaves as being so-called happy to be with the Confederates, which stems from the old Lost Cause talking points, which came about after the Civil War.
Young Washington takes historical events and figures and rearranges them liberally to serve the film's narrative. So for me to just sit here and tally off historical inaccuracies would be an exercise in futility. I also don't want to tread on the work of my peers, such as Chris the Redcoat, who made a superb analysis of young Washington from the perspective of a historian of this era. If there is anything about young Washington that I feel isn't being discussed enough, it is how the flawed presentation of history on display here is being used to propagate contemporary political messages.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack in that statement. But do you think the film at least had a good story?
Oh God, no.
Go on.
Young Washington presents our founding father as a pawn in the game of chess that is the social and political world of colonial America. He's ambitious, striving for a greater purpose that he believes he will find in the British Army. However,
there is some truth to that in real history. George Washington spent the majority of his youth trying to climb the social ladder to become part of the Virginia aristocracy that had connections to the British crown. It's not like the film deliberately attempted to 100% make up that story, even though there are some parts of that were entirely made up. Like the fact that his own best friend disrespected him at a ball, or that he kissed his best friend's wife. None of that happened in real life. In fact, the Washingtons and the Fairfaxes were pretty close up until a couple years before the Revolution, when George William Fairfax and Sally both permanently moved to England, never to return to the colonies that eventually became the United States.
he is initially rejected as he is a lowly colonist who does not come from noble birth and does not have a proper education.
Wait. George Washington as an underdog?
Exactly. The very idea is laughable. They even go so far as to have him live in this rundown, dilapidated home, which is in no way comparable to Ferry Farm, the actual home George Washington grew up in.
It's a work of art. A lot of audiences are going to have different takes on the film and different interpretations of the film. I don't necessarily have a problem with the director and producers attempting to portray George Washington like, I don't want to say an underdog way, but I have no problem with pop culture portraying the founding fathers in a certain way, as long as they understand full well that the stuff that they cover on screen or stage is not 100% in line with what actually happened in the real history. For instance, I have no problem with how they portrayed the certain characters in Hamilton, while also acknowledging that they wouldn't have held these set views in real life. Look at Alexander Hamilton's views on slavery. In the musical, he's portrayed as an uncompromising abolitionist. And in Ron Chernow's biography, he's presented to us as an uncompromising abolitionist. His relationship to slavery was much more ambiguous and complicated because, number one, he said he opposed slavery and he saw the brutalities of the slave trade and slavery while he was growing up in the West Indies. But also, he married into a family that was one of the wealthiest families in all of New York State who owned slaves at the time, during, and after the Revolution. Whatever anti-slavery views Hamilton had immediately took a back seat after independence because he was so focused on trying to establish a post-independence United States government and constitution. And in order to shore up unity between the North and South, there had to be compromises made, which unfortunately prolonged slavery. Also, the Schuyler sisters being portrayed as feminists in the musical, they weren't feminists in real life. And in fact, we don't have any idea of what Eliza Hamilton's actual views on politics were, right? Because most of her letters were lost to history. And the letters I did manage to find from her only talk about family stuff.
Not to mention how Mount Vernon, the Mount Vernon, makes no appearance in the film, despite it having been the home of his brother, Lawrence Washington, for years.
Now, it is true that Lawrence became the owner of the estate that was initially called Little Hunting Creek and then renamed Mount Vernon in honor of a British admiral that Lawrence had served alongside with against the Spanish. It is true that George Washington spent a considerable time living with his older half-brother at Mount Vernon, supposedly because he didn't want to deal with his sometimes overbearing mother, who is Mary Ball Washington, who has a university named after her to this day in Fredericksburg, Virginia.
Instead, the film has to depict him as someone of a lower social class than he ever was, someone who has to sneak into an aristocratic party to pitch himself to the lieutenant governor and boldly flirt with a woman, Sally Carey, who is from a better family than Washington's.
Oh, is that his love interest? Does this movie have a romance?
That's being generous. The two meet after he sneaks into the Fairfax's party. He goes off on a surveying expedition where he's writing lovesick letters while trying not to freeze to death, before he comes back and finds she has married one of the Fairfaxes.
So that guy over here is George William Fairfax, and he was portrayed being snobbish and disrespectful to Washington, but like I mentioned, they were actually pretty close in real life. So that aspect of their relationship, I think the movie got wrong.
Is that it?
Yep. She's never mentioned again. But about that expedition, though.
The one into the Ohio Territory, right?
The very one. He and his friend, Christopher Gist, are surveying the frontier on orders from the lieutenant governor.
So the lieutenant governor here, who was Lord Fairfax, who I think served under Dinwiddie, this guy over here, he was portrayed by Kelsey Grammer.
They meet the Half-King, an indigenous leader who reveals to them that the French have been encroaching on land claimed by the British. As they are rowing back to Virginia, they fall in the water and get trapped on an island in the middle of a river in the dead of winter.
Wait, if their clothes are wet and it is winter, how did they not get hypothermia or freeze to death?
They didn't have a blanket, so they had to cuddle together. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, seriously, how did they not freeze to death?
They were blessed by a miracle.
I'm sorry, what?
There's an overt theme in this film that Washington is spiritually protected. More accurately, he has plot armor. Rather than overcoming obstacles himself, the obstacles magically remove themselves from his path. In this case, the water freezes over, enabling them to walk back to the mainland. But he makes a specific mention of it being a miracle.
You believe in miracles?
Running water, frozen over, and wet clothes, and...
plot armor. But really, God. This metastasizes until the film's climax, after Washington survived.
I'm not a religious person by any means, and I barely talk about religion with my friends or family, but talking about providence back then, or God, or religion, at least in the context of the 18th century, wasn't an uncommon thing, right? There were a lot of founding fathers who were deists, and George Washington was an Anglican, and don't remember if he was religious or not, but even amongst the non-church-going founding fathers, it was not an uncommon thing for the founders to use words like providence, which is something that George Washington often used in his letters. People like John Adams would often use that term as well. So religion was amongst the public conversations of like everyday life in the context of 18th century colonial America.
the Battle of the Monongahela, when the Half-King introduces Washington to the indigenous warriors who had fought with the French. This entire scene exists to have them ordain Washington as the chosen one, who is protected to ensure he carries out a great destiny.
They ordered my warriors to shoot you, and then never miss. Now the legend, spirit of protection, shields those chosen, those who walk in destiny. You'll be shielded by this spirit. So I ask again, what you call? My name is George Washington. We'll remember this name.
Wow, that sounds preachy. Is the whole film like that?
Yeah, it suffers from a bad case of tell, don't show.
How so?
Well, for one, we're told that he's a surveyor, but we don't see him being introduced to surveying or his growth in the field, despite it being
This scene literally here shows him surveying in the Ohio. So I don't understand what the point of that statement of his was.
his growth in the field, despite it being the reason why the lieutenant governor selects him to scout the Ohio territory. After he comes back from this expedition, we see that his brother, Lawrence, is visibly ill and coughing up blood. Yet,
You know what? This is a long video. I might just stop it here and do a part 2 tomorrow, the next day, and then maybe do a part 3, because I tried to do an original draft video for this entire thing, and it was an hour-long reaction video, and you guys don't want to see that. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching.